I trade 10 herds for one night with you, a widow, a drifter, and a love that defied the Wild West. The sun had barely begun to rise over Red Dust Valley, casting a soft orange glow across the dry, rugged landscape. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of earth and dust, and the distant calls of birds waking from their nests. On the edge of this remote valley stood a small, weather-worn ranch, surrounded by a wooden fence that had seen better days. Inside, a woman moved with quiet precision, her hands busy but her mind heavy with memories. She was a widow, strong yet lonely, and her life was shaped by the rhythm of the land and the loss she had carried for years. Her name was Clara, though few in the valley knew it. She had married young, full of hope and excitement, believing that love would last forever. But the world had other plans. Her husband had been a kind man, gentle and hardworking, but illness had taken him away far too soon. Since then, Clara had learned to rely on herself. She rose each morning with the sun, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and preparing what little food they had. Every chore was a reminder of her late husband, and every quiet evening brought memories that both comforted and ached. The ranch was modest, but it was hers, and she had fought to keep it afloat. Each morning, she would step onto the porch, squinting against the light and look out at the vast expanse of land stretching in every direction. The horizon seemed endless, a mixture of golden fields, rocky hills, and distant mountains. It was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. Crops could fail, cattle could wander off or fall sick, and a storm could destroy everything in a single night. Life in Red Dust Valley demanded resilience, and Clara had learned to meet each day with determination, no matter how heavy her heart felt. Clara's days were long, and the work never seemed to end. She fed the chickens, milked the cows, and checked on the horses, her hands rough and calloused from years of labor. The house was small but tidy, each item in its place, a reflection of her careful nature. She cooked simple meals over a wood-burning stove, often eating alone, and spent evenings by the fire, mending clothes or reading old letters from her husband. Those letters were faded and fragile, yet they were treasures, reminders of a love that had once been her world. Sometimes, when the wind howled outside, she would imagine his voice in the quiet, telling her everything would be all right. Though she was careful and cautious, Clara was not afraid of hard work or responsibility. She had learned skills that many men in the valley lacked. She could ride a horse with ease, mend broken tools, and handle the cattle during rough weather. Neighbors sometimes marveled at her independence, but Clara preferred solitude. She had been hurt too deeply to trust easily, and the world felt too uncertain to risk her heart again. Still, beneath her strong exterior, there was a longing, a quiet hope that she kept hidden from everyone, even herself. Life in Red Dust Valley was not easy for anyone, but for a widow, it was particularly harsh. The other settlers had their families, their children, and their futures to protect. Clara had only herself and the land, and she fought every day to make sure both survived. The community respected her for her strength, but there were whispers behind closed doors. Some said she was too proud, others that she was lonely, and a few wondered if she would ever allow herself happiness again. Clara ignored them all. She knew the truth. Life was fragile and trust was earned slowly, if at all. One morning, as she tended to the cattle, she noticed a group of birds circling overhead. Their flight was graceful, yet erratic, and for a moment she allowed herself to pause and watch. The valley stretched endlessly before her, a place of beauty and danger, of isolation and possibility. She had grown to know every inch of this land, every hill and stream, every tree and rock. Yet, even with all her knowledge, she could not predict what the future held. The past had taught her caution, but her heart, deep down, still remembered what it meant to feel joy, to hope, to dream. Clara's evenings were her quietest moments, a time when the world seemed to slow, and the memories of her husband filled the house. She would sit by the fire, knitting or reading, letting the soft glow of the flames warm her hands and heart. She remembered their first meeting, the way he had smiled, the sound of his laughter, the gentle touch of his hand. Those memories were both comforting and painful, a reminder of what she had lost and what she had loved. Sometimes she whispered his name into the silence, and for a fleeting moment she felt as if he were there beside her. Despite the loneliness, Clara had found ways to survive. She had friends in the valley, people she trusted, though few knew the depth of her sorrow. She would help them with their chores, trade goods, and share stories, but always with a sense of caution. Life had taught her that people could leave, that misfortune could strike at any moment, and that loss was inevitable. Still, she carried on, driven by duty, pride, and the quiet hope that one day something, or someone, might change the rhythm of her solitary life. The ranch itself was a character in her story, a living testament to her resilience. The fences, though weathered, kept the cattle safe. The barn smelled of hay and animals, a comforting scent that reminded her of routine and stability. Each morning she would check the gates, feed the animals, and inspect the water supply. Every task was necessary, and she performed them with precision, aware that her survival depended on her own skill and determination. Clara's life was a balance of labor and memory, of routine and longing. She worked from dawn to dusk, yet found moments to reflect, to dream, and to remember. The wind that swept through Red Dust Valley carried whispers of the past, and sometimes she imagined hearing her husband's voice in the rustle of the trees or the movement of the grass. Those moments were bittersweet, a reminder of love lost and a life lived with courage. One day, as she repaired a broken fence along the northern edge of her land, Clara noticed footprints she did not recognize. They were fresh, leading toward the barn and stopping at the edge of the pasture. She paused, her heart quickening, a mixture of curiosity and caution. Visitors were rare in Red Dust Valley and strangers even rarer. She scanned the horizon, eyes narrowed against the sun, and wondered who might be venturing into her world. Life had taught her to be wary, to protect herself, and to expect the unexpected. Even in these moments of uncertainty, Clara felt a strange excitement, a tiny spark of something she had not felt in years. The valley was harsh, and life demanded vigilance, but she also knew that change was inevitable. Whether it would bring joy, sorrow, or simply disruption, she could not yet tell. All she knew was that her life, once predictable and solitary, was about to face a new challenge, one that would test her strength, her heart, and her understanding of what it meant to survive and to live fully. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, Clara stood at the edge of her land, looking out at the fading light. She felt the weight of the years she had lived, the pain of the losses she had endured, and the quiet hope that perhaps in the future, life could offer something more than survival. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a possibility she had almost forgotten. The chance that love, in some form, could enter her world again, quietly, carefully, and with the patience it demanded. And so, as night fell over Red Dust Valley, Clara returned to her house, tending to the last chores of the day, the sky turning deep purple and dotted with stars. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow, of new challenges, and of unexpected encounters. Clara lit a small lamp, the soft glow illuminating her determined face, and settled into her chair, letting the quiet settle around her. In that silence, amidst the memories and the work, the widow of Red Dust Valley waited, strong, patient, and ready for whatever the coming days might bring. The days in Red Dust Valley were long and tiring, but they were about to change in a way Clara had never expected. One morning, as the sun rose over the dusty hills, she noticed a figure moving along the edge of the valley. The man was tall, wearing worn-out clothes that had clearly seen better days. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his boots kicked up clouds of dust as he walked with a steady, almost cautious gait. Clara stopped her chores for a moment and observed him from the porch. Strangers were not common in Red Dust Valley, and she knew better than to assume his intentions. The drifter, as he would later be called, carried nothing but a small satchel and a few supplies. He did not appear threatening, yet there was a quiet strength in the way he held himself. He looked tired, and his face bore the marks of long travels under harsh sun and wind. When he approached Clara's ranch, she stepped forward cautiously, her hands instinctively resting on the worn leather strap of a tool belt at her side. Her eyes, sharp and alert, measured every movement, every gesture. "Morning," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I'm looking for work. I can help with the ranch, and in exchange, I'd be grateful for food and shelter for a while." Clara studied him carefully. She had met travelers before, some honest, some not, but there was something about this man that felt different. He did not demand or plead, he simply offered what he could give. "Work is hard," she replied, her voice even but firm. "It's not a place for idlers or those who can't handle themselves." "I can handle it," he said without hesitation. "I've done hard work before, and I can do it again." Clara hesitated for a moment. Something inside her told her to turn him away, to keep the routine of her life undisturbed. Yet another part of her recognized the value of having an extra pair of hands. The ranch was demanding, and even her strong arms could not manage everything alone. "All right," she said finally. "You can stay for now, but you follow the rules and you work. That's it." The drifter nodded, a faint smile flickering on his lips, though his eyes remained guarded. "Understood," he said, and with that he began helping her immediately, carrying bundles of firewood and repairing a broken fence. Clara watched him work with quiet curiosity. His hands were skilled, strong, and careful, moving with a rhythm that suggested experience and discipline. He did not speak much, but his presence was steady, a calm in the otherwise restless valley. Over the next few days, Clara and the drifter developed a routine. He would rise with the sun, help with the chores, and share the small meals she prepared. They did not talk much, but there was a growing understanding between them. Clara noticed that he respected the land and the animals, treating them with care and patience. He asked questions only when necessary and observed more than he spoke. Slowly, Clara began to trust him, though she never let her guard down completely. The drifter's name, she learned, was Eli. He did not volunteer much about his past, and when she asked, he would only shrug and say that some things were best left behind. Clara did not press him. She understood what it meant to carry memories and pain quietly. Still, in his silence, she sensed depth, a man who had seen hardship and survived it. There was a quiet dignity in the way he moved, a strength that did not rely on words or displays. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat by the fire outside the small cabin. The sun had dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara handed him a cup of water, and he drank slowly, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the trees and the distant calls of animals settling for the night. "It's peaceful here," Eli said finally, his voice low. "Not like the places I've been." Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on the fire. "Peaceful doesn't mean easy," she replied. "Life here is hard. You have to fight for everything: food, water, even the land itself." "I can see that," he said, his tone respectful. "I can work hard, I don't mind it." Their evenings became a time of quiet companionship. They would share simple meals, work together to repair fences, feed animals, and manage the small garden. Gradually, Clara found herself appreciating Eli's presence. He did not demand attention or affection. He simply offered support and reliability. It was different from any company she had known, a subtle comfort that did not overwhelm or threaten her independence. Despite the growing bond, Clara remained cautious. She had been hurt deeply before and knew the cost of trusting too quickly. Yet in Eli, she saw not a threat but a partner, someone who understood the value of labor, respect, and quiet courage. His presence began to change her routine in small ways. She would notice when he had completed a task without being asked, or when he left her a note to remind her of something, written neatly in the fading light of the evening. Small gestures, yet they carried weight in her heart. One morning, a storm approached the valley. Dark clouds rolled in over the hills, and the wind picked up, scattering dust and leaves. Clara and Eli worked side by side to secure the animals and reinforce the fences. Rain began to fall, cold and relentless, soaking their clothes and turning the ground to mud. Yet they continued without complaint, moving as a team, anticipating each other's needs. The storm raged for hours, but by the time it subsided, the ranch had survived with minimal damage. Clara looked at Eli, muddy and wet, and realized that for the first time in many years, she had felt a sense of relief and shared accomplishment rather than solitude. After the storm, they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, listening to the rain dripping from the roof. Clara handed Eli a small piece of bread, and they ate in silence, the quiet broken only by the distant thunder fading into the hills. In that moment, Clara felt something she had almost forgotten: trust, and perhaps even hope. Eli did not speak of love or promises. He simply remained, steady and reliable, offering companionship without demand. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Clara and Eli deepened. They began to share stories, small pieces of their lives, though carefully and cautiously. Clara spoke of her husband, of the challenges she had faced alone, and of the lessons the land had taught her. Eli listened without judgment, occasionally sharing glimpses of his past, tales of travel, work, and survival. Their conversations were simple, honest, and slowly bridging the gap between solitude and connection. One afternoon, while mending a fence near the pasture, Eli paused and looked toward the horizon. "You've done a lot here," he said quietly. "It's not just a ranch. It's a testament to you, to what you've survived." Clara smiled faintly, brushing dirt from her hands. "It's what I have," she said, "and I'll keep it going no matter what." "You don't have to do it alone," he replied, his tone gentle. "I can help, not because I have to, but because I want to." For a moment, Clara considered his words, the weight of them settling in her chest. She had spent years guarding her heart, relying only on herself. Yet, in Eli's quiet presence, she felt a new possibility: partnership, support, and maybe even companionship that did not threaten her independence. It was a feeling both unfamiliar and comforting, a reminder that trust, though rare, could still be earned. As the days grew warmer, they continued to work together, side by side. The cattle were thriving, the garden showed signs of growth, and the house, once quiet and solitary, was now filled with laughter, conversation, and the occasional shared silence that spoke more than words ever could. Clara found herself anticipating Eli's presence, noticing small details: the way he moved, the careful attention he gave to his work, the quiet strength he carried. It was a subtle shift, yet profound in its effect, bringing life and hope back to a place that had known only hardship and solitude. By the end of the first month, Clara realized something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. She was no longer completely alone. Eli was not a savior, nor was he a replacement for her past. He was something different: a companion who respected her boundaries, understood her pain, and offered strength without demand. And for the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future in which her heart, though cautious, could open once more. Though the valley remained as harsh and unforgiving as ever, the presence of another human being, steady and true, had changed everything. Clara and Eli had built a routine, a rhythm of work and quiet companionship that brought comfort and reassurance. They did not rush toward friendship or intimacy. It grew naturally, like the crops in the garden, slowly and with care. Each day brought new challenges, yet together they faced them with shared strength and understanding. And so, life in Red Dust Valley continued, now colored by a new presence, a bond forming between a widow and a drifter. Their connection was quiet, unspoken at times, yet undeniable. Clara had learned that even in the harshest lands, even after the deepest loss, trust and companionship could take root. And as she watched Eli work beside her one evening, the sun setting behind the distant hills, she understood that life, unpredictable and often cruel, could also offer moments of hope, connection, and the possibility of something lasting. The days in Red Dust Valley had begun to settle into a rhythm, though life in the frontier was never truly calm. Clara and Eli worked side by side, tending the cattle, mending fences, and repairing the weather-beaten house. Their days were long, filled with labor and quiet moments, yet a sense of companionship had begun to grow between them, a bond born from shared work, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding of life's hardships. Yet even in this fragile comfort, the Wild West had its own rules, and challenges were never far away. One morning, as the first light of dawn touched the valley, Clara noticed movement near the northern edge of the property. A small group of riders approached from the distant hills, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. Her heart tightened. Visitors were rare and strangers often meant trouble. She quickly fetched Eli, who had been repairing a fence nearby. Together they watched the riders carefully, their bodies tense, ready for anything. The riders slowed as they neared the ranch, and Clara could see the intent in their eyes. They were land speculators, men known for their greed and willingness to take what did not belong to them. They were looking to buy, or perhaps force, ownership of her land. Clara's jaw tightened. She had fought too hard, lost too much, and she would not give up the ranch without a fight. Eli stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to face them alone," he said softly. "I'll help you, whatever it takes." Clara felt a flicker of gratitude mixed with surprise. In all her years, she had faced challenges alone. To have someone willing to stand beside her without fear or hesitation was both strange and comforting. She nodded once, acknowledging the truth in his words. The men dismounted, their expressions arrogant, and approached Clara. "We hear you've got a fine piece of land here," the leader said, a greedy smile on his face. "It'd be a shame to let it go to waste. Maybe we can come to an arrangement." Clara's hands rested on her hips, her posture firm. "This land is mine. I'm not selling, and I don't need arrangements with men who think they can take what isn't theirs." The men exchanged glances, irritation flickering across their faces. "Careful, woman," another said. "The valley isn't kind to those who refuse us." Eli stepped forward, calm but strong. She said, "It's hers. That should be enough. Now I suggest you leave before anyone regrets it." The tension in the air was thick, a storm of potential violence hovering over the ranch. Clara felt a mix of fear and determination. She had faced loss and hardship before, but now, with Eli beside her, she felt a new kind of courage. The men, seeing the resolve in both Clara and Eli, finally backed away, muttering threats under their breath. They mounted their horses and disappeared over the hills, leaving the valley quiet once more. Clara exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You handled that well," he said, "but you don't have to face it alone anymore." That night, as they sat by the fire, the weight of the day settled around them. Clara found herself thinking not only about the danger, but about Eli's quiet strength and steadfast presence. She realized that her heart, which had been closed for so long, was slowly opening to the idea that trust and companionship could exist even in a world as harsh as the Wild West. In the following weeks, life brought smaller challenges, cattle sickness, broken tools, and unpredictable weather. But Clara and Eli faced each one together. Their teamwork became seamless, their bond deeper with every shared task and quiet conversation. In moments of rest, They shared stories of the past, each revelation gentle and carefully measured. Clara spoke of her husband, of her struggles and her fears, while Eli spoke of his travels, the places he had seen, and the lessons he had learned from hardship. Each story, each word brought them closer, though neither rushed the connection. One afternoon, as they were tending the garden, Clara paused to watch Eli work. He moved with a quiet grace, his hands skilled and precise, yet gentle with the plants. She realized that his presence had brought something new to her life, a sense of calm, of security, and of possibility. The valley, which had always seemed lonely and unyielding, now felt a little less daunting. The work remained hard, but the burden was lighter when shared. As the weeks passed, the bond between them became more apparent, even to the neighbors. Small acts of kindness, shared laughter, and mutual respect painted a picture of companionship that was both practical and deeply human. Clara noticed how Eli would anticipate her needs, leaving tools ready or preparing meals when she was exhausted from labor. These gestures, though small, carried profound meaning, signaling trust, care, and a willingness to share life's burdens. Yet life in the Wild West remained unpredictable. One morning, as they tended the cattle, Clara noticed smoke rising from a distant hill. Her heart sank. Wildfires were a constant threat, capable of destroying months of work in hours. She ran toward the barn, her mind racing with plans to save the animals and protect the land. Eli followed immediately, calm and focused, his presence a steadying force amid the chaos. Together they worked tirelessly, moving the cattle to safer ground, reinforcing fences and dousing small flames before they could spread. By evening, the fire had been contained, but both Clara and Eli were exhausted, covered in soot and sweat. They sat side by side on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to feel gratitude, not just for the survival of the ranch, but for the man beside her who had proven himself in both words and actions. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted softly. "You would have managed," Eli replied gently. "You're strong, Clara, but even the strongest people need someone by their side sometimes." That night, as they shared a simple meal, the quiet between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Clara realized that her feelings were shifting. She had spent years guarding her heart, yet now she felt something tender and real, a connection that went beyond convenience or necessity. Eli's presence was not a threat to her independence but a complement to it, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, human connection could bring warmth and hope. The following days brought moments of subtle intimacy, shared laughter over minor mishaps, quiet conversations under the stars, and the simple comfort of knowing someone else understood the struggles of the day. Clara noticed how her heart lifted slightly in Eli's presence, how the work, though still demanding, felt less lonely. She began to trust him in small ways, relying on his judgment, sharing responsibilities, and appreciating his quiet strength. Yet even as their bond grew, Clara remained cautious. The Wild West was unforgiving, and life had taught her that love and trust could be both a gift and a risk. She observed Eli carefully, noting his actions, his character, and his respect for her boundaries. Slowly she began to realize that this man, this drifter who had entered her life, was different from anyone she had ever known. He offered companionship without pressure, trust without assumption, and care without expectation. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara and Eli sat by the fire, listening to the sounds of the valley settling for the night. Eli looked at her thoughtfully. "You've built something remarkable here," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but your life. You've endured so much and still stand tall." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a rare acknowledgement of her own strength. "I had to," she said simply. "There was no one else to rely on." "And now you don't have to be alone," Eli replied, his voice soft but firm. "I'm here if you'll let me be." Clara considered his words, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. Trust had always been a dangerous thing for her, yet she sensed the truth in his offer. Eli was not demanding or insistent. He was offering partnership, support, and the possibility of shared strength. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she did not have to face every challenge alone. Life in the valley continued, filled with work, quiet moments, and small victories. Clara and Eli's bond grew steadily, a partnership built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of life's hardships. The world outside remained harsh and unpredictable, but together they faced each day with determination, courage, and a growing sense of hope. And as the days turned to weeks, Clara realized that life, even in the Wild West, could offer more than survival. It could offer companionship, understanding, and perhaps, in time, love. A love that did not demand or rush but grew patiently, quietly, and with profound strength. Life in Red Dust Valley had a rhythm all its own, shaped by the sun, the wind, and the land itself. For Clara and Eli, every day was a mix of work, care, and small moments of connection that had slowly become the heart of their lives. The seasons changed, bringing scorching heat, biting cold, and storms that tested the endurance of both the ranch and its caretakers. Through it all, their partnership had grown stronger, rooted in respect, trust, and an unspoken affection that neither dared name too loudly. Yet the world beyond the valley had its own plans, and soon, both would be faced with choices that could shape the rest of their lives. One morning, as the sun rose over the rolling hills, Clara noticed Eli sitting outside the barn, staring toward the distant horizon. His expression was thoughtful, almost heavy, as if a silent decision weighed on him. She approached quietly, carrying a bucket of water, and set it beside him. "You've been quiet this morning," she said softly. Eli looked at her and smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've been thinking," he admitted, "about the future and about what comes next." Clara felt a small pang of unease. For weeks they had worked together, built trust, and shared their lives in a way that had felt steady and comforting. Yet now she realized that life outside the valley might call to him, a chance to leave, to seek opportunities she could not provide. She had known this possibility existed, but hearing it made her heart tighten. "You've done so much here," Eli continued, "and I've thought about leaving, about taking work somewhere else. There are opportunities, wealth, freedom, and a life without the constant struggle of the valley. But I keep coming back to this place, to you." Clara's chest tightened. She had spent years guarding her heart, believing love was too dangerous, too fragile. Yet in Eli's presence she had found companionship, understanding, and a sense of safety she had not known in years. The thought of losing him, of returning to the quiet, lonely routine she had grown used to, filled her with fear she had long buried. "I don't want you to stay because of me," she said carefully, her voice steady but soft. "If your life is elsewhere, you should go." Eli shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I don't want that life without you. The land is harsh, the work is hard, but here with you it feels worth it. Worth every challenge, every struggle, every risk." Clara's eyes filled with a quiet emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Trust, affection, and something more, perhaps love, had grown quietly between them, and now it was undeniable. Yet the valley remained harsh, and their future uncertain. They both knew that survival depended not only on hard work, but on resilience, courage, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. Days passed, and the valley brought new tests. A herd of cattle had wandered toward a steep canyon, and both Clara and Eli worked tirelessly to bring them back safely. Their coordination was seamless, a result of weeks of shared labor, trust, and understanding. The animals were saved, but the physical and emotional toll was heavy. That night, as they tended to minor injuries and cleaned mud from their clothes, they finally allowed themselves to speak openly about the bond that had grown between them. "I've been afraid for so long," Clara admitted, her voice quiet and honest. "Afraid to trust, afraid to let someone in. But with you, it feels different, safe, real." Eli reached for her hand, a simple gesture of connection that spoke more than words. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "I won't hurt you. I've seen what loss can do, and I won't add to it. I only want to be here beside you as long as you'll let me." For a long moment, they sat in silence, letting the fire's warmth and the quiet of the valley fill the space between them. It was a silence not of emptiness but of understanding, of mutual respect, and the knowledge that they had found something rare, a bond that could survive even the harshest conditions. The following weeks were filled with a deepened sense of connection. They continued their work, but now every action carried the weight of unspoken affection. Clara noticed the way Eli would pause to ensure she was safe when climbing fences or lifting heavy tools. He noticed her small gestures, like leaving fresh water for the animals or tending the garden, and silently offered his support. Their communication became a mix of words, glances, and shared labor, a language of trust and care that needed no explanation. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Clara and Eli stood together on the porch, watching the valley. The wind carried the scent of earth, grass, and distant pine, and the quiet was almost magical. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we hadn't met?" Clara asked quietly. Eli considered the question, his gaze on the horizon. "I try not to," he said finally, "because then I'd be missing you. Whatever hardships we face, I wouldn't trade it for anything." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, joy, and something deeper, love that had grown slowly, carefully, and with patience. She realized that the harsh valley, the endless labor, and the struggles they faced had shaped not only their bond, but also their understanding of what it meant to care for someone deeply and selflessly. Yet even as their connection strengthened, they both knew that life in the valley was unpredictable. Supplies could run low, storms could devastate the land, and the outside world could intrude at any moment. They had learned to respect the unpredictability of life, but the strength of their bond gave them courage to face it together. One day, a traveling merchant arrived at the ranch, offering supplies, news, and opportunities for trade. Clara and Eli listened carefully as he spoke of towns with thriving markets, new settlements, and work that promised comfort and stability. For a moment, the possibility of leaving the valley tempted Eli, the promise of a life easier, safer, and less demanding. Yet he looked at Clara, standing firm and strong on the porch, and realized that no opportunity outside the valley could compare to what he had found here. "I don't need wealth or comfort," Eli said quietly to her that evening. "I only need us, the land, the life we've built together. Everything else is secondary." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of profound emotion. She had spent years guarding her heart, believing that love was too fragile, too risky. Yet here was a man, steadfast, patient, and true, who had chosen to stay, not for convenience or duty, but because he valued her, the life they shared, and the bond that had grown between them. In the following days, they worked to prepare the ranch for the coming season. The land was demanding, the work unending, but together, they faced each challenge with skill, patience, and determination. Every fence repaired, every animal fed, every corner of the ranch tended was a testament to their partnership. Yet beyond the labor, there was a deeper victory, a love that had survived fear, loss, and the harshness of life in the Wild West. As the first hints of autumn touched the valley, Clara and Eli found themselves sitting by the fire one evening, watching the stars appear in the deep purple sky. The quiet of the night was filled with the gentle sounds of the valley, the rustle of grass, the distant call of an owl, and the soft murmur of the wind. "I never thought I'd feel this," Clara admitted softly. "I thought life would always be about survival, about solitude." "And now," Eli asked gently, his hand brushing against hers. And now, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, I know there's more. There's trust, partnership, and love. Real love, not loud or reckless, but steady, patient, and enduring. Eli smiled, a slow, genuine expression that reached his eyes. Then we face life together, he said. Whatever comes, we face it as one. And so, in the heart of Red Dust Valley, amidst the harsh land, endless labor, and unpredictable world, a love had taken root. A love that had been tested by time, trial, and circumstance, yet had emerged strong, patient, and enduring. Clara, the widow who had once stood alone against the world, and Eli, the drifter who had carried no past but found purpose in her presence, had chosen to stay, to face life together, and to embrace the quiet, steady joy of companionship and love. As night settled over the valley, they sat side by side on the porch, watching the stars, feeling the wind, and listening to the sounds of the land. The ranch, their home, had become more than a place of survival. It was a symbol of resilience, trust, and the possibility of a life shared with someone who truly understood and cared. Clara rested her head on Eli's shoulder, and he held her hand gently, both of them aware that while the world outside could be harsh, their bond gave them strength, courage, and hope. In the end, it was not wealth, fame, or convenience that mattered. It was trust, partnership, and love, the kind of love that chooses to stay, no matter the hardships, no matter the distance, no matter the risks. In the Wild West, where life could be brutal and unforgiving, Clara and Eli had discovered something rare. A connection that defied circumstance, endured adversity, and promised a future filled with strength, hope, and the quiet joy of being together.